Scripture reading today is Exodus chapter 12, verses 1 to 14. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in Egypt. This month is to be the first month of the year for you. Give these instructions to the whole community of Israel. On the 10th day of this month, each man must choose either a lamb or a young goat for his household. If his family is too small to eat a whole animal, he and his next-door neighbor may share an animal in proportion to the number of people and the amount that each person can eat. You may choose either a sheep or a goat, but it must be a 1-year-old male without defects. Then, on the evening of the 14th day of the month, the whole community of Israel will kill the animals. The people are to take some of the blood and put it on the doorposts and above the doors of the houses in which the animals are to be eaten. That night the meat is to be roasted and eaten with bitter herbs and with bread made without yeast. Do not eat any of it raw or boiled, but eat it roasted whole, including the head, the legs, and the internal organs. You must not leave any of it until morning. If any is left over, it must be burned. You are to eat it quickly, for you are to be dressed for travel, with your sandals on your feet and your walking stick in your hand. It is the Passover festival to honor me, the Lord. On that night, I will go through the land of Egypt, killing every firstborn male, both human and animal, and punishing all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. The blood on the doorposts will be a sign to mark the houses in which you live. When I see the blood, I will pass over you and will not harm you when I punish the Egyptians. You must celebrate this day as a religious festival to remind you of what I, the Lord, have done. Celebrate it for all time to come.
I really like, I've said this before, I really like going to the seniors' places and doing services there. I really enjoy doing that. And I've said before, I think it's an important part of what we do, and I appreciate the many people who take part in doing that as well, because it's a way that we remain connected, as a community of faith, as a church community. And that's great. I also find that one of the things I like most about it is I learn stuff, or things happen where it just kind of helps me understand things a little bit better. And I've also said before that when I go to Bashaw Meadows, we have a little hymn sing at the beginning of the service, and there's a lady there who always asks for, the rock one. Rock of Ages, yeah. Always, without fail, absolutely, without fail. So, I'm there on Thursday, and we're going to have a hymn sing, but, we chat a little bit ahead of time, and as you do, and the weather was nice, and we were talking about how it'll soon be Christmas, and maybe we should start singing Christmas carols, ha, ha, ha. And the first person, when I said, let's have a little hymn sing, first person was, Joy to the World. Okay, all right. Ironically, Joy to the World's not actually a Christmas carol. Did you know that? It's actually a paraphrase of Psalm 98, 95, one of the Psalms. Isaac Watts originally wrote it as a paraphrase of a psalm. It was part of a collection he did, and somehow it became a Christmas hit. And anyway, let's sing that. So we did. We sang Joy to the World in September. It was awesome. And then we had to do Rock of Ages. And then somebody picked, I forget what the third hymn was. It was one of those kind of, I think I've done it once or twice before, but it wasn't particularly memorable, so I didn't really remember it. And here's the thing about that. There's your life right there. Unexpected moments that catch you off guard, even if you're familiar with them. Moments that you're comfortable with because they happen all the time and you want it to happen all the time. And then there's the rest of the stuff that you don't always remember. But that doesn't mean it's not important to somebody else. It's just not terribly important to you. It's okay, but it's kind of like filler. That's your life right there, right? Unexpected moments, things that you're comfortable, that you love, that you want to have there, and the rest of the stuff. So do you plan that? Or do you just kind of go, bring it on? Because if you plan that, you're still in Egypt. Here's the thing about this story about Moses and the Exodus. We've got the piece of the story we're hearing today, and we'll hear it all the way through the fall, this story of the Exodus. The piece that we're hearing today is God's instructions for what becomes Passover, the Feast of Passover. The reason for these instructions is, as I'm sure you're aware, they've been slaves forever in Egypt, well, generations anyway, and Moses has a conversation with God at the burning bush, and God says, I'm sending you. You probably remember that Moses, of course, immediately says, yes, let's do this. He doesn't. He says, no, not me. I'm not any good at this. And so Aaron goes with him, and God says, yes, you do. You go and do it. So Moses goes to Egypt, says to the Pharaoh, let my people go. And Pharaoh says, sure, off you go then. No? No. Pharaoh says, not a chance, get out. So there's 9 plagues. Bad stuff happens. But Pharaoh's pretty tough. He's not giving in. Until number 10. Here's the interesting thing about those plagues that we want to remember as part of this story of Passover. Every one of the 9 plagues, Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, this is what's going to happen. Sorry, that's Charlton Heston holding the staff. This is what's going to happen. And then Moses does something with his staff and makes the magic happen. And then there's frogs, or the Nile turns to blood, or there's locusts, and bad stuff happens. Hail that's fire. Moses doesn't have anything to do with number 10. God does number 10. All by God's self. God doesn't need Moses to go to Pharaoh and say, look, okay, you've been tough so far, but this is what I'm going to do now. God does it. So let's be absolutely clear that when we see this story in which all of this bad stuff happens, that does not give us any understanding of this story that says, well, there's a point at which I can choose to take another life because I'm not getting what needs to happen. It's God that does that. That's a pretty significant piece of the story. Because God's firstborn is the people of Israel. That's their understanding of this story. They haven't been born yet, by the way. They're about to be, and that's what happens at Passover. When the Israelites are freed from Egypt, it's their birth story. That's when they become the people of Israel. They're the firstborn. After generations of slavery. Think about that metaphor for a moment. After generations of slavery, freedom. They're the firstborn. So here's the instructions. You have to find a lamb, you get together, you kill the lamb, you mark the doorposts. That's how the angel of death knows to pass over. Did you recognize that picture, by the way, during the scripture reading that was on the screen? That's Charlton Heston in the 10 Commandments, with people gathered around for the Passover, that meal that's happening while you can hear the wailing and screaming in the outside from the houses where people did not mark their door frames. It's a tough moment, and it's a tough piece of this story. The firstborn of Egypt were sacrificed in order for the people to be free. It's a tough part of this story. God took lives in order to free people. There's no easy way. You could explain your way out of that, but there's no easy way to address the fact that lives were lost in order for there to be freedom. So that freedom must be pretty important to you. And it is. It's very simple, isn't it? One day the Israelites are Hebrews, slaves in Egypt, and the next day they're free people. It's not that easy, is it? It's not that easy because freedom isn't just about the removal of oppression. Freedom involves you. It involves you personally. When the Israelites stepped out of Egypt, they still did not have freedom. You know, they still didn't have freedom in their own minds, because as they were traveling on in Egypt, and by the way, you still have to come back the next few weeks as we talk about this story, but over the next few weeks, we'll hear in the story how they traveled through the wilderness. And what's the first thing they do when they get out of Egypt? They cross the sea, right? Moses gets them to the other side. He parts the big moment in the Ten Commandments. He opens the sea, and the people cross through, and then the sea comes back on the Egyptian soldiers that are chasing them, and they're on the other side, and suddenly they're free, right? What's the first thing they do with their freedom? Complain that they didn't have any food or water. That's the first thing that they did. They complained and said, we'd be better off in Egypt. They were still not free. In their own minds, they were still not free. Look at that meal for a second, these instructions, that ceremony, that ordinance is what it's called, that God then requires the Hebrews to do every year to remind them. What's in it? Well, the sacrifice of the lamb, to begin with, bitter herbs to remind them of where they've been, unleavened bread that can be made quickly without a whole lot of resources. And how are they to eat it? With their coat on, their shoes on, ready to go out the door, and they're to eat it quickly. I don't know about you, but I eat most meals like that, by the way. So it's not like we're not prepared for that. The things to remind them of the past, but to be ready and dressed to go. Where? That's part of how we keep ourselves in prison, isn't it? It really is, when you think about it. You have the freedom to plan your future. Wait a minute. You have the freedom to plan your future. If you're somebody who plans things and how exactly they're going to go, and then they don't go, what happens that way, if they don't go that way? How do you feel about that? You're not feeling good about that. Because it didn't go your way. If you have locked yourself into a way, you're still not free. Freedom isn't about being able to get your own way and to plan things so that it goes exactly how you want it to go. Freedom is about being open to the fact that there are surprises in life, there are things that go exactly how you want them to, and there is all that other stuff, I don't know, whatever. Freedom is being open to all of that. I kind of know this. I have to say I kind of know this because I am one of those people who decides how I think this is going to go. And you can tell it went real well when I decided how it was going to go with the children's thing earlier. I kind of have an idea of how I want it to go. And I used to think that's how it's going to go. And then when it doesn't go that way, I'm a little bit more than disappointed. It's annoying. It didn't go my way. Come on. I know, just by looking at the room, I can tell you're all thinking, yeah, been there. You should be thinking that because we have all been there. And you're disappointed. You might be annoyed, but it takes you a little while to get over that and to make adjustments for it. Some people don't actually ever get over that, and they're stuck there. They're locked in. They're locked into the past, and that's not going to change for them. That's too bad, because they're not free. Free is forward. Life is forward. Forward. I happen to live with somebody who has a gift that I wish we all had, which is that when something goes, she has an idea of how it's going to go, and when it doesn't go that way, right away goes, well, that was kind of the way it was supposed to go, and adjusts and goes there. I wish we all had that gift. By the way, it's annoying, just so you know. Because I want my time to be disappointed and annoyed that it didn't go that way when it's way over here, and already she's over here going, oh, this is great. But I think what happens here is that as things are happening, she's adjusting. She's not just accommodating and compromising. She's adjusting to be part of it. And so there's that freedom that however you engage those things, it's where you're supposed to be. Instead of, that's not what okay, this is not going the way I want it to. So you're stuck. You're instantly stuck. That isn't to say that you give up on what you want. It isn't to say you give up on what you plan to have happen in your life. I planned to be a minister. When I was 15, I thought I was going to be a priest. I was Anglican, so give me a break. I thought for sure I was going to be a priest, and then I ended up being a musician for a very long time. And then I kind of came back to it, and this was where I was supposed to be. The journey was not straight. It wasn't, but it was forward. There's an excellent quote from Pope Francis on the screen behind me here. Life is a journey. When you stop, things don't go right. The way is forward. The way is forward. Now, I should not, cannot, and will not, because I can't, talk about what it means to have been a slave who is freed. I can't, because I don't know what that feels like in terms of the oppression of a society where one is a slave. I can't talk about that because I don't know what that feels like. Because I live and grew up and live in a society where we have freedom. I'll clarify that in just a second. It's not perfect, but we have freedom. Mostly. I also can't talk about what it means to be Jewish and have the Passover at the heart of my life, because that's exactly what it is. It is at the heart of a Jewish person's life, because it's where they come from. And that's why that ordinance happens every year. Israel was born in the moment of Passover. It took them a while to grow into it, but it was the birth of Israel. I can't talk about that. I can talk about it a little bit as an inheritor of that tradition, because as Christians we inherit that tradition. It's part of us. But I can only talk about it as that. I can say that if you are somebody who has experienced those things or still experiences those things, part of the freedom I have is to help you, to be part of the discovery of freedom for you. That is our responsibility. It's our responsibility to each other. And it frankly does not matter whether you are somebody who has experienced or does experience those things in the various forms that we still do, or not. Part of the freedom that I have, that I live into, and that you have too, is to help others understand freedom. That's not to say, I do not have the freedom to drive my car down the street and run over anybody who runs in front of me on the street, because collectively as people we've decided what things are good and what things are bad, what things are hurtful and what things are not. Sometimes those things change over time, but we collectively decide those things. That's not what I'm talking about. the freedom to live. This is where the Hebrew people find themselves in this moment. With no experience of freedom, they are about to discover it. And what is the thing that God first reminds them to do? Remember where you come from, but go forward. And remember every year, every moment, where you come from, and go forward. The forward might be is unknown, but are you open to that? If you are, you have the freedom to step into it. It's a journey, but you have the freedom to step into it. So this is the journey that we're on, and this is what the story in Exodus, I think, reminds us, is the journey that we are on. Our life journey. I know that's it's a metaphor, we use it all the time, right? Life's a journey. And then you usually often end up with great meaningless quotes with amazing backgrounds like mountaintop. Oh, sorry, wait. That's, but it is. And it's a journey. We're all on a journey to freedom. We are. We're all on a journey to freedom. And we need to help each other on that journey. We need to be part of each other's journey. So we have a tree over here that Brielle made. It has no leaves on it. What we do have, though, is a basket of leaves. So as I said earlier with the children and things to tie it on with, I'm just going to leave those here. As I said earlier with the children, we're going to ask you to put your wishes for the journey ahead. That the sermons be shorter can be a wish. It won't bother me. But we're going to ask you to put your journey or your wishes for the journey on a leaf. And we're going to put them on the tree at the end of the service. Wow. Brielle really went to town on the creativity here. They're all different shapes and sizes and everything even too. So we're going to pass these around and invite you to put some wishes on here. Leave some for you guys here if I can. And I'm not sure how many we have. But if it turns out that your wish is denied by virtue of a lack of leaves, we will find you. We will find you leaves. We will. Because that's what we're doing here, isn't it? Isn't this part of why we're traveling on this journey together here? As to help each other find their way to what's on these leaves. That's the beginning of, okay, tough choice. Which side goes first? Fred, you're closer. So please put something on your leaf, and then at the end of the service, you can come forward. There's things to tie it on a branch somewhere on there. Feel free to wish anything. I hope that the backpack that you packed on the way to church this morning was openness to new ideas, imagination, creativity, questions. All of those things that we were talking about with the kids. Now is your opportunity to use them. Well, creativity especially, because you now have a hymn and the offering and prayers and other things happening in the rest of the service that you need to work this around. So please do that. Feel free to do that creatively. And join me in singing the next hymn.